Hey fabricators, and welcome to another Advancing Fabric News Roundup, brought to you by Advancing Analytics, your Spark and Lakehouse experts. If you're new here, don't forget to like and subscribe. And I'm joined, as always, by my co-fabricator, Johnny. Hello, Johnny.
Hey fabricators.
Hey. So we've got another news roundup to get through, and this was the December news. What did you think of the December news that came out, Johnny?
So, first of all, obviously holiday season, time to have a bit of a wind down over, Christmas and the New Year, and we were sort of eagerly awaiting the December release to come out so that we could sort of do the news roundup. And literally, the first day of my Christmas holidays was the day that the blog was released. So it's taken us until now, almost a month later, to actually do this news roundup. So apologies to all the fabricators out there who were eagerly anticipating us putting out this video, but we are now here to talk about the December update.
Yeah, it's taken a while to wade through all those emails over Christmas and everything, and kind of over that holiday period. So we are just kind of coming out of slumber, I guess. But there wasn't. There was some interesting things in the news that I remember seeing, but there wasn't like anything that was kind of wowing us. We obviously just had Microsoft Ignite in November. So it was kind of wrapping up a few things in there. But what we'll do is we can take a look and let's pick out the ones that we were most kind of interested in or most excited about.
Let's do it.
So we'll drop a link in the notes, but here's what we have for December. So you want to kick us off, Johnny? I think there was a couple that you quite like to look off.
Yeah, so as always with this update blog, they tend to start with the Power BI bits first because it's kind of a carryover from that Power BI monthly update. First thing catching my eye is the on-object interaction updates. So it feels like the last 2 or 3 updates have included a line for this because it is a piece of functionality that the product team continues to evolve and continues to sort of add options for. There's been lots of feedback from the community. Being quite honest, quite a lot of that feedback's been quite critical. I know a lot of people don't really like it, but what they've almost done now is that gone back to this thing where you can almost have like a legacy view of the world. So this particular pop-up, so anyone who hasn't yet updated to the latest version of Power BI Desktop, or maybe hasn't opened Power BI Desktop for a while, you're going to get this little pop-up for you now, so that if you have configured on-object interactions, and again, this is sort of something that they are trying to make a little bit configurable so different people can have different setups depending on their preferences, but you can now almost reinstate some of the more classic experiences that you're used to. So I guess it's trying to ease people in a little bit more gently into that change.
Yeah, make that change a bit smoother for people, I guess. It's always quite jarring, like when you open one of your apps on your phone and everything's moved to a whole different place. So I get it.
Yeah, I mean, it is still a preview feature, so it is something that you have to switch on in the config. So if you don't use it at all, absolutely, it can just be switched off. But I think a recurring theme for me in the last sort of 5 or 6 months has been this phrase I keep using about grasping the nettle. So it might be a little bit uncomfortable to get used to it at first, but they do keep making improvements. Ultimately, they probably will switch off that classic look at some point. So grasp that nettle and start familiarizing yourself with the new way of doing things now, so that once they do sort of withdraw that classic version of it, you're good to go, and your muscle memory's already reset itself, and you know what you're doing.
Yeah, that's fair. So anything else in that kind of reporting bucket, or kind of talking about any of those ones that was kind of jumping out for you?
Yeah, nothing hugely specific. There's always, every month you've got various updates around connectors and visualizations, so nothing particularly exciting from that perspective. Also, I'll wholly admit, sort of holiday seasons as well, but I've not dived into these wholly as much as I'd like to in terms of exploring them. But in terms of overviews and the things that I feel are going to make an impact, just ready for the reporting side of it, the on-object stuff.
Yeah, and I think that's what you see kind of coming into this the December update. Usually, I think is where you've got a couple of things that people are potentially already aware of, but they're not going to be dropping things when the majority of people will be kind of taking some time over that holiday season into the new year as well, and getting on top of things again. For me, kind of looking under that developer tab is a couple of things just in that Git integration. So Git integration, conflict resolution. So this is an interesting one, quite a kind of short couple of paragraphs on this, but just talking about how if you're making, if you've integrated your Fabric workspace into Git source control, if there's changes being made locally or there's changes being made inside Fabric, how that kind of resolution happens. I mean, like if there's any developers out there that use Git source control regularly, then that conflict resolution where things have been edited in two different places can be quite difficult to fix, especially if you're sticking to the command line. Like that is definitely something that I am Googling to resolve conflicts, but certainly it looks like they're aiming to try and make that as simple as possible to basically say, well, what one do you want to keep? How do you want to resolve these conflicts? But it's always going to be something that will be a little bit of a pain point. Personally speaking, I think that's something that comes down to development processes. So don't have people on the same branch developing things locally and also developing things within Fabric as well. But I could go on for hours on that one.
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing I'd sort of say. Firstly, other search engines are available. Bing search is fantastic. Doesn't have to be Google. But yeah, in terms of that sort of Git conflict resolution type thing, especially again, I guess coming from that sort of more Power Platform and low code type background, it's going to be new to some people, and you will probably break it at least once. I think people that are sort of used to using Git integration, which I guess historically has been more on the engineering side of things. You never really understand how it works until you've broken it badly at least once. But yeah, hopefully this sort of online conflict resolution is going to at least help you out a little bit.
Yeah, I think so. The secondary piece here, I'll just scroll down a little bit because the second piece I wanted to kind of highlight was that there's more supported items for Git integration. Now, funnily enough, this one was kind of slipped out under the radar as Ignite happened in November, and we published a YouTube short on it. So check that one out. Just kind of summarizes that your Git integration now covers notebooks and lakehouses. So there's still some elements in there within Fabric that are missing that Git integration. But if you have a Git integrated workspace, then you can now see that with your notebooks and lakehouses, which is great to see that you're kind of increasing that. If I jump over to Fabric, I've got a workspace open already. We've got that Git integration set up, and you can see that we've got more of those elements like notebooks and lakehouses are now showing as synced rather than unsupported, which you'll see still against things like data pipelines within Data Factory, for example. So we're getting there. We're getting there to that kind of full code coverage within Fabric, which is great.
I think Data Factory is the one that everybody is waiting to drop. So I know it is on the roadmap. But yeah, looking forward to when that finally lands as well. But good in the meantime that, as you say, that coverage is expanding.
Yep. Yeah, definitely. So anything else jumping out to you in the news? As you say, it's the usual kind of a lot of Power BI oriented, like the visualizations and things like that. There's always a lot of news every month, isn't there?
Yeah, definitely. So on the under the core heading, I think both of the items under the core are worth a little bit of a shout out. So the header for this section is core, and almost for me, I think most of the core type news is quite often around the sort of administration and platform side of it. So there's potentially quite a significant change here because they're going to change the default retention period on workspaces. So as it stands currently, if a workspace gets deleted, as an administrator, you can actually go back and restore that from, it doesn't just basically disappear into the ether straight away. It sort of sits there in a dormant state
Nothing's ever deleted on the internet, right?
Well, yeah, exactly. But well, potentially it is now, according to
Yeah.
this. So that retention period by default has always been 30 days.
Mm.
We're now going to make that more configurable, so you can now set it to a minimum of 7 and a maximum of 90. So you've got up to 90 days retention if you want to extend it. But I think just worth bearing in mind that the default's going to be 7 days. So
Yeah.
hopefully it's not a feature that you need to rely on too often. But if you have come across that now, that period of opportunity to restore it is shrinking.
Yeah. That seems
So
like quite a dangerous change, switching from 30 to 7 is the default. Like I
yeah,
get that there's a wider range there that you can adopt that, but that could catch a couple of people out.
yeah, possibly. From personal experience, any time where a workspace has been deleted and needs to be recovered, you've noticed pretty quickly. It's been
Yeah.
notably sort of same day. Now, I guess the risk is potentially, if that restoration of a workspace is only really able to be enacted by an administrator, and it happens on over a bank holiday weekend. So, say it's Easter,
Yeah.
and it just means that potentially that window of opportunity shrinks a little bit. I think you'd probably be okay still, to be honest, but it's just being aware that there's a little bit more urgency now if you do need to get it restored. But,
Yeah. So all Power BI admins aren't allowed to take any more than a week's worth of holiday then.
yeah, or just make sure you've got more than one admin. No single sources of success.
Yep. Redundancy.
So the next one I'd want to look at is the one straight below it as well, the introduction of Fabric admin APIs. There are already a whole host of Power BI admin APIs. Those admin APIs can be used for administrative tasks and monitoring, I would say, with the two sort of key things that those admin APIs do. They are now looking to supersede those with Fabric admin APIs. So as it stands for the time being, don't worry, the Power BI admin APIs aren't going to magically disappear, but they're going to start. The plan is eventually to retire the Power BI ones and just replace them with the Fabric ones.
Yeah.
As the Fabric ones, there's going to be some overlap for a period of time where you'll have both a Power BI admin API and a Fabric admin API. And I think pretty much anything from a new features perspective is likely just to go into the Fabric admin API bucket. But yeah, certainly if you're into sort of that automation side of things, the way we manage our Power BI estates, we try and use some sort of automation and DevOps principles and infrastructure as code.
Yeah.
So if you're doing that kind of thing, the fact that this is going to be made available is a really powerful thing.
Yeah, definitely. Kind of makes that provisioning of workspaces and artifacts and things like that probably a lot smoother and simpler.
Yeah.
No, I like it. It's good. Positive news, at least. So if I drag this all the way back up the top, so kind of going down, a few things around Synapse on the data warehousing side, nothing that's really kind of jumping out. You're kind of looking at some recovery options and log checkpointing, things like that, bringing in more of those kind of features that you would expect to see. On a data engineering side of things is the rich data frame preview in the notebook. Just gives you a little bit of a better interaction with your notebooks within the data engineering experience. Not going to dig too much into that, to be honest. I think you were looking at the semantic link update was one that you were quite excited about.
Yeah, absolutely. So this semantic link is whereby you can use sort of notebooks from the data science experience to interact with Power BI semantic models. So
Yeah.
on the one hand, obviously, I'm the big Power BI geek. The flip side of that is you prefix anything with data science and I get a nosebleed. But like, this is interesting. So the crying shame is that I've not had the opportunity to really play around with this and explore it. But specifically, the bit that kind of sort of intrigues me is that second bullet point that says you can update any tabular object model property via Timsel. So Timsel's tabular model scripting language. And that is sort of essentially meaning you can basically run scripts from notebooks to update your tabular object model. Now that tabular object model is how things like tabular editor run their scripts and automation. So you can sort of build out lots of automation using those scripts, and that suggests to me that you might be able to start doing things like that in a notebook environment as opposed to using third-party tools like tabular editor. So
yeah,
I had a really brief look at it, and it's very code based. So that updating of tabular object model isn't particularly a new thing. And the thing where tabular editor shines is the fact that it produces a really nice user interface that makes it very simple to do those tasks.
yeah.
Whereas it's very code orientated doing it in a notebook. But still, I found it's very interesting that that's enabled via semantic link now.
Yeah, so you've got those capabilities, and maybe with that different skill set rather than tool set, where you might lean heavily on tabular editor to do this kind of thing, and it's got that great interface. But doing it this way, you can do it in code. You can kind of build it out, and probably have a little bit more flexibility around parameterization and things, maybe.
Yeah, possibly. Whether or not
yeah.
there are any limitations in terms of things you can and can't do, again, I've not had a chance to properly explore, but yeah, could be interesting.
Yeah, and drop us any comments if anyone's actually tried this out or kind of dug into it and things like that. And it's certainly something that we'll need to dive into and play around with. What's next then for you that kind of jumped out?
Yeah, so under the real-time analytics, the enabling the KQL database. So I'm calling it KQL still. I don't know if everyone else wants to call it KQL. I am calling it Cakewell. I'm going to set that trend and get you all to follow. But yeah, ultimately, I guess from a real-time analytics perspective, I hadn't realized that initially that doesn't natively write directly to Delta
on the hood,
right to a KQL database. But now effectively you can, inside of the workspace, mirror it. So that effectively means real-time Delta files, which I think is really exciting for things, as it calls out in the notes there. Using Power BI Direct Lake mode on top of a Delta Parquet file that has been generated via the RTA experience has got the potential to be a really powerful thing in terms of that real-time reporting story.
Yeah, I think it's something the whole streaming side of things within Fabric is something that I want to explore in a lot more detail, just what that story looks like and kind of integrating it a bit better. But this is certainly a step in the right direction, right? So kind of getting that in that consistent Delta, not Delta Parquet, that Delta format under the hood. So yeah, pretty interested in that one as well. So yeah, there's a few other things around real-time analytics worth taking a look at. One of the ones, or a couple of things that was jumping out to me, again, reading some of these back in December and kind of looking at it, so some of these things were essentially slipped under the radar again. So the Azure Databricks activity is something that we again created a short on because we spotted it in the wild and it was like, great, this is excellent. For example, like if I jump over to Fabric, like I can call a notebook, but there's been that limitation with Fabric so far where if I'm calling a notebook, this is a notebook that's inside Fabric and I'm kind of stuck with that capability. But now if I go to activities, I can pull in this Azure Databricks activity, and that lets me set cluster information. It lets me actually point to a notebook within Azure Databricks. And for me, that's great. Seeing that kind of interoperability between those platforms means that we can start to consider and look at hybrid architectures where potentially we're doing some of the kind of data curation and we're pushing things out to Power BI within Fabric, but we're potentially doing a lot of that kind of data engineering heavy lifting within Databricks. And maybe there's people out there who already have platforms with Databricks and they want to start adopting Fabric, and it means they can integrate that. They don't need to move things immediately. So there's a lot of kind of exciting things there, but that's something that I was like, has this not been announced already? Had to kind of look back some of the notes and things, and I think it had kind of slipped out early, and then obviously the announcement of it being brought into the December announcement.
Yeah, exploring those hybrid patterns is again something that really excites me. That kind of,
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, Advanced Analytics, we're both a Microsoft partner and a Databricks partner, and I guess our heritage is in building lake houses with Databricks. So that ability to sort of get the best of both worlds and sort of take essentially some of the great work that's already been done with clients.
Yeah.
Using Databricks, you don't have to start thinking, oh, we're gonna have to throw away and completely re-platform. You can cherry pick to an extent, the best of both worlds in terms of which platform is going to best suit your requirements.
Yeah, exactly. So the last one I wanted to jump on was the read and write to Fabric Lakehouse using Azure Data Factory. Now, your Fabric Lakehouse, or One Lake under the hood, has still got that ADLS Gen 2 URL essentially, so we can still kind of treat it like ADLS Gen 2 under the hood, but this just makes that kind of that little bit easier and a little bit simpler, where we can connect directly to a lakehouse. So if I jump over to Azure Data Factory, nice familiar old Azure Data Factory here, still getting a couple of little updates, which is nice to see. If I've got this copy data activity, for example, I can pick a new sync data set, and this is where I see this new addition. If I scroll down, I can push this to a Microsoft Fabric Lakehouse as files, or I can push it to a Microsoft Fabric Lakehouse table. So that's our Delta tables under the hood. So that gives me the option to set up that link service. It gives me the ability to actually push directly to a specific lakehouse. So again, we start to see a little bit more of that flexibility of potentially Microsoft kind of going, we want people to move on to Fabric, but there's organizations out there that have everything in Data Factory at the moment. How do we make this a little bit easier for them to make that transition? They've got everything in Databricks. How do we integrate that so that the tools can all play nicely together? And how do we kind of tie them together and make it as easy as possible for people to get what they need, I guess?
I'm really glad you called this one out as well, because reading it, I totally misunderstood it, because that's not actually a new Fabric feature per se. It's a new Data Factory feature. It's just that subtlety between the fact that you've got Azure Data Factory and you've got Data Factory. So that's actually a new Azure Data Factory thing that means you can integrate with Fabric. Right, that makes more sense to me now. That's good.
Yeah,
I'm going to as well, like just spotting it on the fly, call out that very last one as a quality of life improvement that's huge. I remember from like my old SSIS days when you could disable a step in a particular pipeline.
Yeah.
If you were doing debugging, and my frustration for so long being that you couldn't do that in Data Factory. You could kind of put debugging steps in, so you could stop, but you always had to start from the beginning, and you couldn't skip steps. So being able to set that activity state in Fabric Data Factory, that's a really cool one.
Yeah, nice little helper for developers. Nice little treat thrown in at the end, I think. Definitely. Great, yeah. So yeah, I mean that's it for the news for December. And I think you'd mentioned as well we're not going to see any January news coming out.
The product team at Microsoft, they I believe tend to have some a development freeze over the holiday period anyway, and that effectively means that come January there aren't really any big there aren't any releases to make. So the cadence slows down, so you don't really get that update from the Microsoft guys. They have said that they're going to do a retrospective, so they'll do a blog that says rounds up everything they did in 2023. But yeah, there won't be a news update for us to report in on.
Yeah, and definitely leave comments for us in this post if there's any features that have came out over the last 6 months or more that you want us to dive into or go into much more detail. Then leave them there, and we can certainly take a dive into those features and actually talk about them in more detail, because we don't have that roundup coming in January, which would be dropping roundabout now, to be honest. But aside from that, and before we return for that February news roundup, is Johnny and I will be at Fabric February, which is in Oslo this year, and it's the 7th to the 9th of February, isn't it?
It is, yeah. So 3 days conference in Oslo. The 7th is a pre-conference day where you've got Patrick and Adam from GuynaCube giving a full day workshop. You've got general sessions on the Thursday, which is where we're going to be. So I'm doing a session on analytics engineering. And what are you covering, Craig?
I'm talking about data mesh and data mesh federation within Fabric, and just how you kind of build that out from a kind of strategy perspective.
Cool. That'll be an interesting one. I will make sure I'm there.
Yeah, so like definitely, if you are in Oslo, if you're at that event, come and say hello if you see us. And until next time, please like and subscribe, and we'll see you for another Advancing Fabric news roundup.
Cool. See you later.